I'm currently working on the electrical system for the Corolla, and on the internet people have a tendency to gloss over this because it can be boring to watch. And it is. So I'm going to gloss over it as well. Kind of. I think it's important to show at least a little bit of the process. I'll show you a little bit of schematic reading and how I make connections and how I'm doing things. But there's an awful lot of it to be done, and I don't want to spend, episode after episode just doing that. However, I have found a subset of the electrical system which might be interesting. I am making my own gauges, and I'm doing so by taking apart the old gauge and then kind of putting them in a new housing. And so I intend to show you how that works on this episode. Yeah, that's it. So, I've designed these in such a way that I can fairly quickly and easily change the appearance. This is what I wanted to go with, and I'm not sure how well that's holding up, showing up on the camera, but you may be able to see that I have had, I can show this to you here, some plastic, it's acrylic, laser etched. It's important to use acrylic because polycarbonate will yellow, and you should, so something loud's coming by here. Some people know that I'm filming and they shouldn't drive by and make noise. Okay, so I've had this laser etched. It's best to do it on the backside. It's best to use acrylic. It's best to use cast acrylic, and that's what I've done here. Now the problem is, if you put that on a silver background, the numbers can be difficult to see. I intend to edge light with an LED these gauges, so it could be that what I need to do is just have them constantly illuminated even during the day, or I could choose a more contrasting background. This one I've done out of carbon fiber, and I think that looks pretty good. You can actually see them even when it's not lit, and I think they'll show up pretty well at night as well. But like I said, the good news is I can literally, as long as the material's fairly thin, I can literally take it out and make them red, blue, green, whatever, and I can do the same with the color of the LED lighting. So I'm kind of digging this carbon fiber look. At first I wanted something that looked a little like an Aston Martin, and I was totally digging this aluminum look, but it's just flat aluminum. The Aston has like a mixture of metals. It really looks like a chronograph, and I'm not sure this quite makes it. So I'm kind of thinking this carbon fiber look. Either way, that part isn't important for the build, because what I do is I bolt that together. I have connected electrically to the important parts of the gauge electrically, and what happens is I've got a little lip inside here, and so this can just slide right in until it bumps up against the lip, and then it would look something like that, which actually looks pretty good, I think. I'm very happy with that. On the face would bolt another piece of clear acrylic, which I haven't made the bezel for that yet, but I have made it for the smaller gauges. Originally I cut that on my CNC router, and the product came out pretty bad. Never mind the extra holes around there, but you can kind of see when I tried to put the bevel on it how it just gummed up and just didn't go in straight. It wanted to push the bit over, and I wound up doing this on the little mini lathe, and it was much easier to do by hand, and I'm really happy with the way these came out. They're still a little, if you can see a line, it's just some Sharpie on there, but you can see that they just go on, and this plastic still has the protective cover on it. I plan on leaving that on for a while, but basically the guts get loaded in. I did make this on the CNC router. This black part here will help secure the wires, so the wires will come down and I can put some heat shrink around there and hold them in place as a strain relief. But basically this goes inside the back like that, and along the top I've made these little boards. They're not real pretty, but it doesn't matter, they're not really seen. And these little boards go up against the top and slide down, and it's difficult to see, but there's a little tiny LED right here on the end, and there are 4 lines going to it. So this LED is an RGB LED with resistors in line, and those resistors obviously bring the current on the LED down. Now, so how it goes in is something a little like this, and then it slides in. This LED will line up with the gauge bezel with the numbers on it, and I've even put a little notch out on the top here for that LED, so I can't actually put on because I got 2 screws in the way, but it kind of goes on the edge like that, so it fits perfectly like that, and then the whole thing fits in and bolts from behind. So what I'm doing today electrically is this little guy here. I intend to try and start building these gauges up, and what I intend to do here is first protect this copper from corrosion by using a conformal coat on there, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So as I mentioned, I made these little pieces in the back as kind of a strain relief and a way to mount the LEDs and run the wires down and strain relief them. And you may notice that I've actually got 2 pieces here put together. I made a bunch of these, and I have 2 pieces put together because what that allows me to do is, if I should find that a material I want to put on the back side for appearance is a little bit too thick, then what I can do is pull one of these out to shove it back and make more room for the one on the front. So I'm hoping that this whole design makes it pretty easy just to unbolt the back, slide the whole thing out, take off the front, change it out, and then slide it all back together again very easily. So that's the idea. So it's funny, when I look at them this way, I'm actually kind of digging the aluminum one better now than the carbon fiber one. But as you can see, if I so chose, I could actually do one way and one another way. I could even put a picture of the Millennium Falcon back there if I wanted, or my wife and kids, whatever. You know, you can put whatever you want if you print it out. And if it starts to get old and faded in the sunlight or something, pull it apart, stick another one in there, which is, I think, is a really cool feature to have on this. But now that I look at them, I'm kind of digging the aluminum one in the housing. What do you think? So as you can see, these boards are made of copper. They're copper-clad boards that are it's just very thin. It's almost like a flex. It's not really a flex circuit, but it's almost like one. It's so thin. And copper corrodes, so I got some of this. This is a conformal coat. And all of that writing on the back is how this will kill you. So it's pretty nasty stuff apparently, and I intend to use a fan to help ventilate this when I put it on the boards. So this is my selection of wire colors for an RGB LED. So red, green, and blue. Guess I'll take the gray and the orange, the white, and the yellow. Yeah, that seems appropriate. Alright, so that was pretty cool. I think it looks pretty good. And what I've done here is I put a little piece of heat shrink, and that basically pulls these wires together with the black piece and keeps that going forward. As I was pushing it in, the little flex circuit kept wanting to sort of come away, and if it doesn't line up with the edge of the clear, then it won't edge light it, right? So I thought because it was tapered there that it wouldn't work so well, but it seemed to work just fine. And then I put another piece down here to strain relieve it, to strain relieve these wires. Now I need to attach 2 here. That'll actually make the gauge work, right? And I can't remember why there are 3 and only 2, so I had to go look at the schematic. What is important is which wire goes where, because again, I've got 3 screws. How do I know which one's which? Now, if you want to know how I got to this point, you can go to my website. It's ozone2000.com. And I explain how I got all the way up here, and I can tell you from looking at this what's what. But I couldn't remember, and it's hard. You have to trace through these things. Sorry about that. I forgot I'd zoomed in. Let me zoom back out. Oop, the other way. All right. So this is the gauge cluster that came with the car. I bought a second one, both to get needles and to experiment with in case I blew something up. And that's good because it gave me 4 needles, and I need 4 because I've added 2 extra gauges here. And so I've got 2 here and the 2 that I'm already playing with right now. And it allowed me to, like I said, probe around here on the back. You can see I've already done some stuff. So if you look on the front, the fuel gauge is sort of the middle-ish one. So the middle-ish one versus the one on the outside. And you can see there are 3. And so what I can do, it's kind of painstaking, it's really hard to follow all these little lines, right? But you can just say, okay, well this guy here is connected. You can see the flex circuit they have in the back here. You can see the trace that's connected to that one. And in fact, I'm actually lucky because it's actually labeled IG+, which is the ignition that goes to the, ultimately goes to the alternator. But anyway, you can just follow this trace down, and you can see not only where it goes, but all the places it stops along the way. And you can just sort of follow it on up to one of these 3 connectors, and then see what color the wire is, and then match it to the color in the schematic. And that's how I know which one to attach where. So I'm actually over here, right? So I'm going to go do that now just to make sure they're right. And then what I'll do is, based on the schematic and which one's which, I will pick a color wire and make probably a little ring connector here, and have that screw right in and attach, and then those wires will come out in one bundle. And I'll keep these 4 separate, and I think because I have a number of items that are being lit, with LEDs, I'll make all those connectors the same, and then I'll make the ones that control it different, and I'll have to figure that out. In fact, I kind of already did, and I think because there's so many wires here, you can see on the back of the gauge cluster, these are really weird connectors, and they're sort of open, and they come in, and the fingers in the connector actually connect to the little fingers here. And so I was thinking, because there's so many, I might use something like this and just have the wires come in on one side, and then I could attach as many as I want. And the reason why I might want more than one is because you may have noticed I've decided to add 2 odometers, one on the tachometer and one on the speedometer like normal. That way I'm going to have one, as it says here, that actually tracks how many miles are on the chassis versus how many are on the engine. And what I've done is I've taken the odometer and speedometer out of the one I got, and I ran it up to the number of miles that are on the chassis of the car, so it's ready to go. And then the other one is here, and I think that'll work. I don't think the computer says here's your value. It might, it might be that they'll both read the same and it'll be useless. In fact, I'm just now thinking of that. Well, we'll see. I ran one up to the value. Oh, that's right. It won't, because I intend to actually put this gauge in the car, just hidden behind the dash, and just run wires up to show the odometer. So I'll have 2 different ones, because I think that value is actually stored inside here. In fact, if you look on the back here, there's a chip here. I think this chip actually controls I think this chip actually will store the data, and this chip, I think, controls the output to the digits. But I may be completely wrong, and we'll find out, in which case I'll just disconnect one, and it'll just be blank and it won't look great, but then maybe one day I'll go back and change it. I don't know. But anyway, that's the plan for now. And that way, if I use something like this, I could put one odometer reading coming in, one from the speed sensor on the transmission, and just have 2 coming out, one to each one of the speedometers. That's the plan. All right, so I started tracing out where the wires go, and I just kind of keep my pen on it, because when they get close to here, it's very easy to lose it with your eye. So I started with the bottom, which I'm pretty sure goes to the fuel sender, and I just follow along this wire here. And if I follow it all the way up, I get to B3. So this connector, I hope you can see it, this is A, B, and C, and they kindly marked it here B1. So they're numbered 1 through B16 this way. So A1 through 13, C1 through whatever that is, 13. So I'm on B3. So I know the bottom one goes to B3. So then I come over to my schematic and I find, so here's my fuel, and sure enough, there's a B3, and that's the one that goes through to the sender. That is my bottom one. So I know that my bottom one needs to go to the fuel sender, and that wire was green, so I thought I might use a similar color. But I'm already using green for the LED, and I'm not sure I want to confuse them, so I'm probably going to pick a different color, or maybe I'll have two. I don't know. It doesn't really matter that much. But I will now make a little ring terminal and have it come out onto that, and I'll label it with a little flag saying to fuel sender B3. So as you can see, at least hopefully you can see that, or actually not see, that it's very difficult to see. That's a lot of C's. Anyway, it's very difficult to see the gauge with it being clear and just etched into this plastic on silver background, right? So I'm hoping that that shows up on camera okay. So I decided that if I'm going to use this, I mean, at the angle I'm at right now, from here, I literally can't see anything. So that's useless. In fact, I have white gauges in the Spider, and I don't like them because under the right lighting conditions, I can't really see anything. So, and that is when the lights are on. So what I've decided to do is I think I might have to leave the, I may have to leave the lights on all of the time on the dashboard, which isn't the problem. So let's see what it looks like during the day. Yeah, and I think that's very visible even during the daylight out here. If I went out onto the driveway, it would be brighter out there in the sun, and it would tell me for sure, but I'm pretty confident here. Let's take another color. There's green. Blue is probably the hardest one to see. So let's see what blue does. Try and get it not to short out. Yeah, and you can still see it fairly well. I'm pretty sure this is going to be okay. Alright, so I decided to take the gauge out onto the driveway and verify what I thought would be true, and as you can see, if that comes out the way it does with my eyesight, you can't see the light at all. That is currently blue. And if I bring it, and if I figure, well, I'm in the car, and it's in the dashboard, it's going to have a little bit of shade, maybe kind of like it does now, and I can read that, whether I can see the light or not. But what if I get maybe just a little more in the shade? I mean, I can kind of still read that, but I did find an angle right there, for instance, where it's almost impossible to read even though it's lit. So now I'm having a second thought as to whether or not I want to make that a darker background. So there's the carbon fiber one, and what I found is that it almost doesn't matter what background you use, because there's always an angle where you'll get reflection off the plastic and it just washes out the etching in it. But I've decided the black's a little bit better than the silver, and even though I think this looks really cool, I think I'm going to wind up going with the carbon fiber look. So I cut a backplate on my CNC router for the back out of Kydex, and Kydex is kind of like an ABS thermoform plastic, and I even put a little spot in there for a grommet where the wires come out. So there it is in the back, and I put a little grommet in there for the wires, but I kind of mangled it getting it in there. I think the hole needed to be maybe a little tiny bit bigger, but I'm pretty happy with that. It looks really pro. Here's from the front. I used the spare front because it would have less dust on it and stuff. I'll use the other one as a spare. And then I just need the front cover. So I have stainless hardware going into aluminum, and as I understand that's a no-no, so I'm going to put a little anti-seize compound on each one of these, in each one of these bolts. Because I have 4 wires, I decided to use this Molex connector that's also 4 pins. There's no need to key them because all the lighting's going to be the same, so it doesn't matter really where they plug in. I'm sure the length is going to determine that anyway. And if you always wondered but never knew, the gender of a connector is determined by the pins inside, unlike humans where you get to select. So if the pins inside are female, then it is a female connector, even though, and so this would be the female connector, even though it appears to plug connector housing wise into this other connector, but it's the pins that determine it, like I said. Also, Toyota, and I think that is actually like an industry standard, and Toyota always names theirs with this little clip thing here at the top. Looking at the female connector, it's read like a book, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the way I intend to label mine. And this is important if you're ever going to do your own gauges. If you pull the needle off of, I'd say most gauges these days, assuming of course it's analog, if you pull the needle off, the motor's free to sort of spin, and in fact, in your gauge cluster you'll notice there's a little peg that the needle rests on when it's at 0. So if you pull the needle off and the motor spins it all and you put it back on, it's going to read off. And in fact, I have determined a method by which to put each needle on exactly in the right spot. Kind of. So if I feed a certain signal into the speedometer, I know that I'll be at 60, and then I could put the needle on right at 60. But I think what I'm going to do is actually drive the car, use GPS to determine what my speed is, and then put the needle on at that time. Well, I'll just have it in my lap and my wife's driving or something, because I have different tire size on my car, so I know what the output signals of the speed sensor from the transmission are supposed to be to read 60, but I don't know that that'll read 60 on my car due to the difference in tire size. So that's probably the way I'm going to do it. On this one, I do have it documented, I think, somewhere, and I'm not really sure where. I'm just going to put it on temporarily, and I can always just pull the face off and then move the needle if I need to. But I'm going to put it on temporarily, and I'm going to put it down below because the tank will be empty, so when I first turn on the car, there won't be any gas in it at all, so it should be really, whatever it's reading should be off the bottom of the scale. So that's where I'm going to go ahead and put the needle for this one, but I will put it all the way on. That way I can fairly easily pull it off and then adjust it as necessary for the reading, and I'll do that on each gauge. Another little interesting tidbit I thought you might be interested in case you didn't know this. I think most people do. But let's say you rent a car and you're going to go fill it up before you return it, and you're not really sure which side the gas door is on. Well, auto manufacturers have conveniently put right next to the fuel symbol, hopefully you can see this, I'm going to move it around so the reflections change, but right next to that fuel symbol with the little gas pump, you can see an arrow, and that tells you what side of the car the gas door is on. And I went ahead and put the correct side for my car on there to keep with the standard. And there's one gauge, essentially finished. This is for the light. This is to hook it up. Got a back on it, got a front. So what I need to do is, I still have to wire it obviously, and then I'll pull the front off, and when I'm ready and I know exactly where the needle goes, I'll pull it off, put it on the right spot, button it back up, mount it in the dashboard. It'll look something like that. I'm really happy. I just have I basically have 5 more gauges to go. Lather, rinse, repeat.